I'd like to try to describe the distinctive traits of today. First of all, it is a much more open or creative space of foreign affairs conduct. There is nothing that has been predetermined in advance. Things may develop differently, and a lot depends on the accuracy and the balance of measure and the degree of restraint and the degree of well-thought-over actions of all the stakeholders. And in this ample space, it's very easy to lose your way and lose your bearings, and as we can see, that happens quite often. Secondly, this multipolar space is very dynamic. Changes happen, as I have said, rapidly and abruptly overnight. And it's hard to prepare for them, it's hard to predict them, and one should respond instantly, in real time. Third, what is important, this space is much more democratic, paving the way for a big number of political, economic stakeholders to come into play. Probably never in history we had that many countries in the global arena that seek to influence the regional and global developments. And a bigger role than ever before is played by the cultural, historical, civilization specifics of different countries. One should find common ground and concurrence of interest. No one is ready to play by the rules set by someone somewhere far away. The Western countries succumbed to see and have this absolute and wield this absolute power. This was a serious, strong temptation, and not to succumb, one had to have some historical vision and good intellectual level of education and groundwork, and those who made the decisions did not have this high capacity. The power of the United States and their allies peaked at the end of the 20th century, but there can be no single force that can run the world on its own, prescribing what should be done to everybody, how everyone should breathe. There were some attempts of that, but they all failed. 35 years ago, when it seemed that the confrontation was coming to a close and the Cold War was coming to a close, we hoped that for an advent of the epoch of true cooperation, it seemed that no ideological and other obstacles were there that would preclude to resolve jointly uniform problems and common problems for the humankind, sorting out and resolving conflicts and disputes, building upon the mutual respect and taking into account everybody's interest. Let me digress and give a historical excursus here. Our country, wishing to eliminate the grounds for bloc-based confrontation, create the common space of security, stated 2 times that we were ready to join NATO. For the first time, it was back in 1954. In the Soviet times, and for the second time during a visit by President Clinton, US President Clinton, in Moscow in the year 2000, when we spoke about that with him, and both times we were turned down, straight away. I repeat, we were ready for joint work and non-linear steps in the global security and stability sphere, but our Western counterparts were not ready to rid themselves of the captivity of geopolitical and historical stereotypes and this simplistic world view. And I stated about that on many occasions in public. When we spoke with President Clinton, he said, it's very interesting, I think it's possible, but several hours later in the evening he said, I sought the advice of my team, it's unfeasible. And when will it be feasible? It boiled down to nothing. So a real opportunity to shift to the positive vector is something that we had, but alas, some different approach prevailed. The Western countries succumbed to see and have this absolute and wield this absolute power. Many of the so-called Many believe that the so-called liberal world order was acceptable or even convenient. Well, yes, hierarchy would limit the capability of those who are not at the top of the pyramid of the food chain, if you permit me but still, at the same time, they reside at the foot, but still, that would lift a big chunk of responsibility from them. Just the rules are as follows: just accept the set of conditions, fit into the system, and you receive your dues, and be happy, think of nothing. Others will think and make decisions instead of you. No matter what they say, no matter what they use as pretexts, that was the case, and the experts in this room know that. Some people were conceited enough to believe that they can admonish everybody. Others played up to the strong ones, being obedient, bargaining chip and item and trade, avoiding problems and receiving their small perks. And now in the old world in Europe, we have a lot of such politicians left still. Those who were not in agreement, tried to uphold their interests, were considered kind of weirdos, to put it mildly, and they were told nothing will come out of that, and so you are nothing against our power, an empty spot. The most recalcitrant ones were educated by the self-proclaimed grandees, and without any scruples, and resistance was useless, they said. That did not result in anything good. Not a single global problem was resolved. At the same time, still new and new problems keep piling up. The global governance institutions created in the past either don't operate and work properly or have lost their efficiency to a huge extent. No matter what capability or potential a single country might have, any power has its limits. In Russia, we know that there is a proverb saying, might makes right. However, there may be a stronger might. There always can be a stronger might. You know, this is the gist of the global developments. There may always be a stronger might. Attempts to control everything around oneself would result in overstraining and overload, and that would impact the internal stability, weaken the internal stability, giving rise to legitimate questions among the nationals of those countries who tried to act as grandees. You know, some time ago, I heard similar things from our American colleagues who said that we acquired the world, but we lost America. I just want to ask a question. Was it worth it? And have they acquired anything at all? The interests of countries will never coincide fully, and all the history of international affairs is about struggle to fulfill their interests. But, you know, a brand new global situation, the tone set by the global community and the global majority, let us hope that all the stakeholders will take each other's interests into account while coming up with regional and global solutions. No one can attain their goals on their own in isolation. The world, despite the aggravation of conflicts and the crisis of previous model of globalization, fragmentation of the global economy, is a holistic, interrelated place. We know that by our own experience. You know how much efforts were applied by our opponents to, roughly speaking, knock this country out of the global system, to drive us into political, cultural, information isolation, into economic autarky. The number, in terms of the number of the reprisals that are shamefully dubbed as sanctions, Russia has the record. 30 or even more thousand of different restrictions. Have they attained anything? I think that people around the room know that these efforts failed altogether. Russia has demonstrated the highest degree of resilience and ability to withstand intensive global pressure that would ruin an entire country, not only an entire country, but coalition of states. And we take pride in that. We're proud of our country, of Russia, and our people and our armed forces. But I want to mention something else. It turned out that the global system, where they want to squeeze us out of, will not let Russia go, because Russia has become a weighty part of the global equilibrium and balance, not only because of its territory and the people and defense and technological industrial capability and its minerals, its reserves. All those things I have just enumerated matter a lot. These are very important factors, but most importantly, it is so because the global equilibrium and balance cannot be established without us, neither economic or strategical or cultural, logistical, no type of balance. I believe that those who tried to destroy that, well, got to know. Some are still obstinate in their desire to have their way, inflicting, as they say, the strategic defeat on this country. Well, okay. If they don't see the fact that this plan is doomed, if they're stubborn enough, well, I hope that life will show them, and the most stubborn, short-witted ones will understand. As we see that our European neighbors are now trying to patch up the cracks and plaster the cracks of the edifice of Europe, they want to overcome this cleft, to strengthen the shaken unity that they were so proud of and flaunted with, not because of resolving, not with the help of resolving their own domestic problems, but, stoking up the enemy image. But people in those countries are wise enough to, take to the streets, and despite they stoke up situation at the outer border, they try to recreate the well-known enemy that they invented hundreds of years ago, Russia. And many people in Europe do not know what's so horrible about Russia. Why should they tighten their belts countering Russia, forgetting about their own interests, sacrificing them and acting in their own detriment? But the ruling elites of the United Europe try to stoke up hysteria. They say that the war with the Russians is in the offing, and they keep repeating that gibberish over and over again. I look and hear what has been said. I'm bewildered. Can they be serious? Can they believe in what they're saying, that Russia is trying to attack them? This is impossible to believe, and they try to convince their own people.
Or the Ukrainian tragedy, another grave example. It's painful for Ukrainians, for Russians, for all of us. The causes of the Ukrainian conflict are well known to everyone who diligently familiarized themselves with the history of this conflict. And I believe that you are well aware of the root causes and of my position, because we have spoken on this at length. But the other thing is important: those who encouraged and provided weapons to Ukraine and seek them against Russia and gave rise to the nationalism there. They do not care not only about the Russian interests, but also they do not care about the Ukrainian interests, about the true interests of its people. They don't care much about these people, because for them they are just expendables, for the globalists, for the expansionists in the West, and for their lackeys in Kiev. And we see the outcome of these policies. There is nothing to add to this. And how does one resolve them in a polycentric world? And how would the situation in Ukraine would have been resolved? I believe if there was multipolarity, then its different poles had their own stance around this Ukrainian conflict regarding the potential tension zones or chasms, and then the collective resolution would be much more responsible. There would be an understanding that all the parties to this difficult situation has their own interests, and they have objective and subjective circumstances, but one cannot ignore them. All the countries would be eager to resolve this in peaceful means. And this is true for Russia, for Ukraine, and all our neighbors, because the countries in the region should have a main say in establishing a regional system. They are the ones who have the best chance to agree on the acceptable solution, because that's their interests. Their life depends on that. As for the other countries, extra-regional countries, for them, this situation, in this case, the Ukrainian situation, is just a card in a bigger game, in the game of their own. And usually it has nothing to do with some specific issues of various countries or of any particular country or the countries that are involved in this conflict. This is just an excuse to use this card to resolve their geopolitical issues, to expand their control zone, or to maybe make some money.
But we noted on many occasions that we're living at a juncture with rapid and profound changes, I'd say dramatic changes, and no one definitely can fully foresee the future. That does not rid us of obligation to be ready for everything, anything that can happen. Actually, as the recent times and recent developments have shown, we should be ready for anything, and everyone's responsibility is huge for the fate of their own and for this country, and the stakes are extremely high.